You know that feeling, right? Like you're watching all the videos, you're reading the articles, you've you've memorized hundreds, maybe even thousands of words in that new language you've been trying so hard to learn.
Oh, yeah, you feel totally ready.
Exactly. You feel ready. But then the second someone actually stands in front of you and asks a really simple question, your mind just goes completely, utterly blank.
You just freeze.
You freeze. You stare at them. The silence just stretches out. And I mean, you can physically feel your brain scrambling, but nothing happens.
Right. It's the classic conversational freeze.
Yeah.
The vocabulary is locked away in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But the pathway to retrieve it and actually speak it aloud has entirely shut down.
Yes.
And the really frustrating part is the harder you try to force the words out, the more paralyzed you become.
It is an agonizing experience. I mean, the clock is ticking. The other person is looking at you with that, that polite, patient smile.
The worst kind of smile.
It really is. And the panic just floods your entire system. So today, we are taking a deep dive into the anatomy of that exact freeze. We're going to rip it apart, figure out why the brain sabotages us in these moments, and, well, more importantly, how to systematically disarm it.
Because there is a way to disarm it.
Right. And to do this, we have this absolutely fascinating stack of sources today. It's a comprehensive set of transcripts tracking a 30-day language fluency challenge. And it specifically follows an English teacher and a student who are navigating the exact hurdles of learning to speak a new language.
Yeah. And while the overt context of these sources is learning English, the underlying mission of this deep dive is really about sharing tips for confident communication in general.
Yes, extracting the ultimate mechanics of it.
Exactly. We're going to unpack the psychological barriers of speaking, reframe how we interact with our own mistakes, and map out these highly practical daily habits that basically shortcut the path to genuine fluency.
I am incredibly excited about this, honestly, because these communication tips don't just stay in the language learning box. They really bleed into every single area of life where you need to speak up.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you're navigating a bustling market in Tokyo or you're just trying to summon the courage to pitch an idea in a Tuesday morning staff meeting.
The underlying anxiety is the same.
Exactly. The
Good job.
mechanics of overcoming that internal freeze are identical.
Fluency is consistently misunderstood as this, magical talent. People assume you either have the ear for it or you don't.
Right, the language gene.
Yeah, but the sources fundamentally reject that. Fluency is a mechanical habit. It's an interlocking system of psychological and physical practices that, honestly, anyone can build step by step.
If they understand the machinery.
Right, provided they understand the underlying machinery of how human beings actually process language.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because before we can even touch on the daily habits of confident communication, we really have to look under the hood and diagnose that freeze.
We have to find the culprit.
Right. And looking at these transcripts, the sources point to a very specific, totally invisible culprit behind that blank stare we all dread.
Yeah, it's the brain's internal translation process.
The translation trap.
Exactly. It operates like this hidden virus running in the background. It just consumes all your cognitive bandwidth and completely stalls natural conversation.
And we see this play out so vividly with the student in the sources. I mean, he describes the exact chronological sequence of what happens in his head during a conversation.
It's exhausting just reading about it.
It really is. So someone asks him a question in English. His brain instantly hits the pause button on the interaction, and then there's this 4-step process.
Right.
First, he takes the English question and translates it into his native language. Second, he formulates his response in his native language.
Still entirely in his head, by the way.
Right, still in his head. Third, he tries to translate that new response back into English, and only then, on step 4, does he actually attempt to open his mouth.
Which, if we break that down from a neurological perspective, the sheer cognitive load is staggering.
It's massive.
Your brain is attempting to run full-scale translation software in real time. But simultaneously, it's trying to manage the social dynamics of the interaction.
Oh, right, like reading body language.
Reading body language, maintaining eye contact, monitoring tone. Human working memory simply cannot juggle that many complex tasks at once without lagging.
Which creates this massive bottleneck. By the time you've pushed your thought through all 4 stages of that internal translation factory, the conversation has already moved on.
It's gone.
Yeah. The person you're talking to has either changed the subject or they're just looking at you wondering if you even heard them.
Right. The freeze happens because your processing speed just cannot match the rhythmic pacing of a normal human interaction.
And that delay triggers an emotional response, doesn't it?
Oh, massively. You realize you're taking too long, so the amygdala fires up, stress hormones just flood your system, and the cognitive pathways tighten even further.
It's a vicious cycle.
It really is.
Yeah.
So to combat this, the primary directive from the sources is surprisingly straightforward, though, not necessarily easy.
Well, you have to fire the middleman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You must train your brain to think directly in the target language.
And they use this brilliant visual example for this in the transcripts. The teacher explains that when you're walking down the street and you see a dog, your instinct is to look at it, think of the word for dog in your native language, and then translate it to the new language. But they argue you have to sever that connection completely. You look at the furry animal with 4 legs and a tail, and you attach the new concept directly to the visual image.
You just look at it and think dog.
Yes, just dog.
Because what you're doing is building a new direct neural bridge between the concept and the vocabulary, completely bypassing the old linguistic infrastructure you've relied on your whole life.
But wait, I have to push back a little here, because reading that advice made me physically uncomfortable.
Really? How so?
Well, isn't it profoundly unnatural to force a new internal monologue when your inner voice has been speaking your native language for, decades?
I mean, sure.
I try to imagine walking around forcing my brain to think in a completely different language, and it feels like trying to write a letter with my non-dominant hand. It's clunky, it's exhausting, and my brain is just constantly screaming to default back to what's easy and automatic.
Well, the friction you're describing is very real. It absolutely feels clunky and artificial at first. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, that profound clunkiness is the exact reason why this mental rewiring must begin in zero-stress environments.
Okay.
You do not start this process by attempting to think complex, nuanced thoughts about, like, politics or philosophy in a new language. You start by narrating the absolute most basic realities of your existence.
So stripping it all the way back to, like, caveman levels of observation.
Precisely. You open your eyes in the morning and you actively think, I'm awake.
Right.
You feel a pang in your stomach and you think, I am hungry.
Yeah.
You touch the table and think, table. You are slowly forcing the non-dominant hand to grip the pen, so to speak.
Just tiny little reps.
Right. Over time, as you force those tiny direct associations, the neural pathways thicken. The speed of your processing catches up, and that old translation software finally starts to power down.
But bypassing that translation software introduces a totally new vulnerability.
It does.
Let's say we've successfully started thinking directly in the target language. The safety net of our native tongue is just gone. We're pulling these raw, unfiltered words directly from our brain.
And that's scary.
It is, because suddenly we hit the next massive hurdle outlined in the sources, which is the emotional barrier of perfectionism.
Oh, the fear of sounding foolish.
Yeah.
It is the silent killer of language acquisition.
Truly.
When you remove that buffer of translation,
Yeah.
you expose yourself to the immediate reality that you might say the wrong thing, use the wrong tense, or totally mispronounce a word.
And that fear is just paralyzing for so many of us. But a major recurring theme throughout these 30-day challenge transcripts is a radical reframing of how we interact with our own mistakes.
Yeah, this part is crucial.
The teacher constantly stops the student to remind them that mistakes are not an enemy to be avoided. They are the actual mechanism of learning.
Right. I mean, even native speakers stumble over their words, use improper grammar, lose their train of thought.
I do it every day.
We all do. And that reframing shifts the entire objective of speaking. The sources argue passionately that we need to prioritize communication over perfection.
Communication over perfection. I love that.
Fluency is rarely about flawless grammatical execution. It's about comfortable, effective information transfer. Are you understood by the person standing across from you?
Right.
If yes, the interaction is a success, regardless of the grammatical mess you made getting there.
Oh, there is a hilarious, highly specific anecdote from the source material that drives this home perfectly.
Oh, the party story.
Yes. The teacher shares this classic mix-up from his own learning journey. So he was at a social gathering, and he wanted to express that he had nothing to do. He meant to say, I'm bored.
Right.
But instead, he confidently announced to the entire group, I'm boring. Which, of course, means he's an uninteresting person who puts people to sleep.
A seemingly microscopic grammatical error, that drastically alters the entire meaning of the sentence.
Totally alters it. And the people he was talking to just stared at him with these deeply confused, slightly concerned expressions.
I can only imagine.
But that is the crucial takeaway. Making that embarrassing, awkward mistake in public created this intense, emotionally charged memory.
He never made that mistake again.
He never, ever confused bored and boring again. The slight sting of embarrassment acted as a mental highlighter. Mistakes stick to the ribs of your memory in a way that quietly reading a textbook chapter never, ever will.
Exactly. The mild stress response triggered by making a mistake signals to the brain that this information is important for survival, or, at least social survival. It forces adaptation.
That makes so much sense.
And part of dropping the perfectionism trap is also abandoning the need to sound like an academic scholar. The sources heavily emphasize that highly complex vocabulary is entirely unnecessary for fluency.
Yes, they say to keep it agonizingly simple. Like, if you want to express happiness, you do not need to pause the conversation to construct a labyrinth of a sentence like, I find myself exceedingly delighted by this unforeseen turn of events.
Nobody actually talks like that.
Right, just say I'm very happy. The emotional payload delivered to the listener is identical, but you used a fraction of the mental gymnastics to get it there.
Precisely.
Reading this section completely reminded me of the process of learning how to ride a bicycle.
Oh, how so? Walk me through the parallel.
Okay, so when you first get on a bike, you are hyper-aware of the mechanics. You're intensely monitoring the angle of the pedals, your grip on the steering, all the microscopic shifts in your balance.
Right,
Right. In language, those are the grammar rules. You're gripping the handlebars, terrified of falling over, completely tense. But eventually, with enough hours in the saddle, your body takes over. You stop thinking about the physics of the bicycle, and you just pedal. You look up at the scenery. You ride.
What's fascinating here is how perfectionism actively prevents you from ever looking at the scenery.
Yes.
If you refuse to take your feet off the pavement because you are terrified the bike might wobble, you will never learn to ride. The wobble is mandatory.
Wobble is mandatory.
If you aren't making messy, awkward mistakes in your conversations, it is a glaring indicator that you are simply not practicing enough.
Wow.
The ultimate goal of language is to build a bridge of connection to another human being, not to construct an impenetrable, flawless fortress of grammar.
I really love that imagery. A bridge, not a fortress. The fortress keeps you safe, but it also keeps you entirely isolated.
Exactly.
So we have to allow ourselves to wobble, but this brings up a logistical problem.
Okay, what's that?
If we've dropped the need for perfection and we're trying to stop translating in our heads, how do we actually get the reps in? Especially if you don't live in a country where the language is spoken, which is, the reality for millions of learners around the world who are just studying from their bedrooms.
Right. Well, this is where the transcripts pivot from psychology to the hard mechanics of fluency. They introduce a highly effective, solitary daily habit known as shadowing.
Let's define shadowing, because when I first saw it, it sounded like an espionage tactic.
It does sound a bit mysterious.
Based on the sources, shadowing is a technique where you listen to a piece of native audio, like a podcast, a clip from a YouTube video, a snippet of a movie, and you immediately repeat the sentence out loud, almost speaking over the original audio.
Yes.
But you aren't just reciting the text, you are fiercely attempting to mimic the exact rhythm, the melodic intonation, and the specific pronunciation of the speaker.
It is vocal mimicry at its absolute highest level.
Yeah.
You are attempting to duplicate the music of the language, not just process its data.
Right.
And the critical insight the sources stress here is the absolute necessity of consistency over duration. You do not need to lock yourself in a library for 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon to study verb conjugations.
Which is a massive relief because nobody has the stamina for that anyway.
Exactly. 5 to 10 minutes a day of active, focused shadowing is exponentially more effective than a massive weekly binge.
Just 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah. We have to remember that speaking a language isn't just a cognitive exercise. It actually requires the development of physical muscle memory.
Physical muscle memory.
Yes, your mouth, your tongue, your lips, and your jaw are being asked to form completely unfamiliar shapes and produce foreign sounds. It is literally a physical workout for your vocal tract.
Oh, that makes sense.
So it needs daily, repetitive conditioning to build the neural pathways that allow those movements to become automatic.
And speaking of that physical workout, there is a highly specific, slightly quirky habit recommended in the text that I found brilliant.
The self-narration.
Yes, they explicitly tell the student to talk to themselves out loud, constantly. It's so effective.
They suggest narrating your mundane daily chores. You're alone in the kitchen making dinner and you say out loud to an empty room, I am cutting the vegetables. Now I am boiling the water. The water is hot.
It sounds eccentric, but it is a remarkably strategic tool for building that physical muscle memory we just discussed.
I have to admit, my first reaction was that this sounds completely unhinged.
Sure.
Like, if my partner walks into the kitchen and catches me giving a play-by-play commentary to a pot of boiling water, they are going to be deeply concerned. Isn't it a bit bizarre to just wander around your house talking to inanimate objects?
It might look bizarre from the outside, but you are deliberately isolating the variables. By talking to an empty room, you are entirely removing the single heaviest barrier to fluency, which is social anxiety.
Oh.
When you narrate the vegetable cutting, there is no fear of judgment. There is no impatient listener waiting for you to finish your sentence.
The stakes are gone. Right. You're creating a laboratory environment where the physical muscles of your mouth can experiment with forming strange new sounds without the adrenaline spike of an actual social interaction.
Ah, I see. You're separating the physical act of speaking from the psychological stress of conversing.
Exactly.
It's like a dress rehearsal in an empty theater. You can trip over your lines, you can completely butcher the pronunciation of a word, you can stop and try it 5 more times, and the stakes are absolutely zero.
You build the physical capability without the emotional pressure. The sources also highlight a crucial adjustment to another daily habit, which is how we consume media.
Right, the subtitle trick.
Yes. Many learners watch movies or TV shows in their target language, but they leave the subtitles on in their native language.
I'm totally guilty of this.
Most people are. But the sources advise a critical shift to active listening. You must switch the subtitles to the target language as well.
So if you're attempting to learn English, you watch the English movie, but you force yourself to use English subtitles.
Yes. Leaving the native subtitles on simply keeps your brain locked in the translation trap we discussed earlier.
Because you're just reading.
Exactly. You end up just reading your native language while tuning out the audio. By using target language subtitles, you force the brain to map the spoken auditory sounds directly to the written vocabulary.
That builds that bridge again.
Right. It reinforces that direct connection, slowly teaching your brain to interpret the sound's meaning without using your mother tongue as a crutch.
Man, here's where it gets really interesting for me. We've put in the solitary work. We've trained the brain to bypass translation. We've built the muscle memory by shadowing podcasts and narrating our kitchen chores.
The foundational stuff.
Right. But eventually you have to leave the house. How does all this isolated zero-stakes practice survive contact with the real world, where unpredictable humans are actually staring at you?
Well, you survive by refusing to leave everything to chance. The final pillar of the transcripts focuses heavily on preparing for highly specific, entirely predictable scenarios, rather than trying to memorize abstract grammar rules that supposedly cover every possible situation.
They call it scripting the real world.
Scripting, yes.
The sources walk the student through highly practical scripts that listeners can adopt immediately to sound instantly more grounded. Let's look at the restaurant scenario, because that is universally recognized as a high-stress environment for a learner.
Oh, absolutely.
The waiter is hovering, there's a line of people behind you, the pressure is immense.
It is the ultimate test of the conversational freeze.
Exactly. So the transcripts teach you to abandon the clunky textbook approach. Instead of pointing at the menu and saying, I want water, you memorize the natural script. I'd like a glass of water, please.
It's smoother.
Right. When you walk in the door, you don't hold up one finger and say one person. You use the script. Table for one, please. They also introduce conversational softeners, like the phrase on the side.
That's a great one.
Instead of struggling to explain that you don't want the salad mixed with the main course, you just deploy the script. Can I have a salad on the side?
Notice how those scripts accomplish more than just basic communication, too. They demonstrate a layer of cultural fluency.
Cultural fluency? What do you mean?
Well, by using the rhythmic phrasing that native speakers actually use in those environments, you blend in. You signal that you understand the social choreography of the interaction.
Oh, that makes total sense. They extend this to shopping as well, explicitly noting the regional variations.
Right, the UK versus US differences.
Yeah. If you're shopping in the United States, your script is to ask, where's the fitting room? And at a restaurant, you ask for the check. But if you are deploying your scripts in the UK, you ask for the changing room and the bill.
And possessing that microscopic detail of cultural fluency prevents the exact moment of panic that leads to a freeze.
Because you know exactly what to say.
Exactly. You don't want to confidently ask for a check in London and be met with a blank stare from the waiter, which, instantly spirals you back into the translation trap.
Even basic greetings get the script treatment. The sources push the student to abandon the robotic classroom response of, I am fine, and upgrade to a more fluid conversational script like, I'm doing well, thanks for asking, how about you?
So much more natural.
Or throwing in natural, informal fillers like, long time no see. But honestly, when I first read this section, it felt a little bit like cheating.
Cheating.
Yeah, like you aren't really speaking the language organically, you're just reciting lines from a play.
Well, it isn't cheating. It's strategic cognitive automation. Think about the reality of human interaction. The vast majority of our daily conversations are not deep philosophical debates.
Fair point.
We are engaging in highly repetitive, highly predictable transactions.
The 80-20 rule of conversation, I was thinking about this as I reviewed the notes. Almost 80% of what we say every day follows an identical pattern.
Think about your morning routine.
Exactly. You order the coffee, you ask the cashier how their day is going, you ask a stranger for directions. It is the exact same dance, day in and day out. If you can automate the scripts for that 80%, you instantly buy yourself the confidence and the mental bandwidth to handle the unexpected 20%.
That is the exact mechanism at play. Mastering these situational scripts frees up a massive amount of working memory.
Right.
When you walk into a cafe and you don't have to burn energy panicking about how to conjugate the verbs required to order a pastry, you can actually be present.
You can just exist in the moment.
Right. You could focus on the human elements of the interaction. You can make eye contact. You can smile. You can notice the tone of their voice. You can actually enjoy the connection, which, let's remember, is the foundational purpose of language in the first place.
That is such a powerful synthesis. The goal is human connection, not passing a spontaneous verbal exam.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, the next time you feel that freeze creeping up your spine? Let's trace the path we've walked today.
Let's recap.
First, you must dismantle the translation trap. Stop running everything through the filter of your native tongue and start attaching new words directly to the world around you, starting with the simplest objects in your room.
Second, completely reframe your relationship with mistakes. They are the friction required for memory. Allow yourself to wobble on the bicycle. Prioritize the transfer of meaning over the flawless execution of grammar. Build the bridge, abandon the fortress.
Third, respect the physical mechanics of speaking. Use shadowing and, unapologetic self-narration for just 5 to 10 minutes a day to literally build the muscle memory in your jaw and vocal cords. Remove the audience to remove the anxiety.
And finally, automate the predictable. Rely on specific, culturally accurate scripts for the repetitive transactions of daily life. By reducing the cognitive load of ordering coffee, you preserve your energy for genuine human connection.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Oh, I like provocative thoughts.
We've spent this entire session exploring how to bypass perfectionism, drop the internal translation, and confidently speak a new language. But think about how those exact same barriers exist in our native tongue.
They absolutely do.
What if the raw, vulnerable process of learning to speak a foreign language without overthinking, what if forcing yourself to just connect despite the mistakes actually rewires your brain to be a more confident, less anxious communicator in your native language too?
That's fascinating because by systematically practicing vulnerability and letting go of the desperate need to sound perfect, you might find that the social anxiety that causes you to freeze in your native language begins to dissolve as well.
Exactly.
You're training yourself to value connection over presentation no matter what language you're speaking.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you find yourself freezing up, staring blankly when someone asks you a question. Just remember, the words are in there, the knowledge is locked in your head. You just have to let yourself wobble on the bike a little bit until you find your balance. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.